right before the MLR happened, we were coached by a Justin Fitzpatrick, who was a ex-Ireland international, and he coached the club for 5-6 years before MLR arrived. And then as soon as MLR came, he actually got picked up as the coach of what is now the Houston SaberCats. So upon him leaving, he took, I think, 6 or 7 players with him. And then, the Seattle Seawolves also announced their team, which then I think we had 15 or 16 guys that played in that inaugural season. So you can imagine, right, losing all of those players, especially your best players, you're losing a full side. So that was pretty difficult, and I think they still competed well. I believe that year, that the 2018 season, the Seattle Rugby Club still made it into the BC playoffs and made a good run. So we were still doing pretty well, but having the MLR arrive without actually having, a plan for these professional clubs and how they necessarily give back to the amateur level, because upon arrival it was mainly just take because they need to fill teams, which totally makes sense. As a professional team, you're looking at how do you win, how do you make money, especially when you're building something in the US, which doesn't have necessarily like a big, we have a collegiate program, but it's nothing like what the NFL has built, right? So now you're looking at filling in your team from locals, because you have to have a certain number of Americans. You can't just go grab people from other parts of the world. So it was tough at first. I think 2018, 2019 really decimated the club in numbers and experience. It was also tough to kind of start to understand, right, as a player, how do you then give back to your club, right? I think there was a disconnect of what does it mean to become a professional player. You don't want people necessarily just disappearing from the club, and that was kind of what was happening. Is all of a sudden someone get picked up for the professional team, and then it becomes tough to go and revisit your club and give back in some way. I think those first 2 years we had a good group of guys that did that, but it was still tough to keep that kind of culture going. You get guys who get moved into the Seawolves but may not necessarily be starting. It's tough to teach them that kind of new system. For example, like in New Zealand, I played there for a while, and if you weren't playing for your professional club, you would go and play with your local club, and that was kind of a required thing. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But here, for a while, it was tough because people would think, oh, I'm not making a professional team, but if I go and play with my club, I might get hurt and not get my shot, right? I go in and playing next week. And that would kind of, cascade throughout the season of this guy not getting, time with the Seawolves, but unwilling to play for the club because they're worried about injury or something happening, which would take away their opportunity to be up with the Seawolves. So we had to change that mindset, and it's been an ongoing thing of, more rugby is good, is better, right? You can get injured walking down the street and tripping over, a sidewalk. You need to be able to take your chances while you can, and nobody's going to get better at playing rugby by sitting on the bench. So that's been an interesting transition of getting guys to understand that, hey, just because, you may have, signed a contract with the Seawolves doesn't mean that you cut yourself off from the club. It means that you get to train with the Seawolves and be part of that professional and potentially get an opportunity, but you still need to play with your club because that's what makes you a better rugby player. And you get to give back to the guys who are up and coming. It was obviously very tough for the Seawolves to come in and all of a sudden create this environment that was professional and had everything that an athlete needs, especially when 80% of the guys that you're bringing in have jobs, right? They have to actually work for a living, and the MLR wasn't necessarily paying those bills. The first season in 2018, we had practice from like 7 to 9 or 8 to 10 sometimes. And that might be every day, but that was the way that they could get fields and make sure that guys could still work and all that stuff. And so that was a really tough period of figuring that out. Um, it's changed quite a bit as more people have bought into the Seawolves. Also, the way that they handle player welfare as far as like place to live, um, transportation, all those things. So now I think my final year with the Seawolves was the 2021 season, and um, for that one, I mean, our training schedule was basically from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. Right, and we'd do that four to five times a week based upon what our um, game time was over the weekend, if we were Saturday or Sunday, which obviously is basically impossible if you have to work a 9 to 5, right? So if you're not being paid enough, but at the same time, they're able to bring in a lot more players now, at least like younger guys, to give an opportunity. They have a place to live. They have some sort of car to get around, or at least a group of people with a car to get around. And it's just a much better time to train, right? Training at 8 o'clock at night and then trying to go to bed and then do it all over again the next day, and it's pretty tough on the body. And luckily we were a pretty experienced team in 2018 to go and win it, but that was a difficult time for sure. So yeah, the MLR has, and there's still things that they need to fix, but they're definitely changing to the point where it's becoming more and more professional. And unfortunately for guys who live in the area, who aren't getting a great contract, right? They may be making minimum wage on a scout team. A lot of times it's just not doable as far as having a real job, making the money that you want to make, right? And playing rugby. So hopefully as it grows, that'll start to change and the opportunities will come, and more guys won't have to try and manage that. But it has definitely gotten quite a bit better over the course of the years. I don't think so too much. I mean, we don't have a ton of guys who necessarily move back and forth, and even if they do, a lot of them are still making our Tuesday, Thursday practices, or at least one. I think it was great that I got to play in the 2021 season when Clarkey was there. I think Clarkey took over in the 2020 season, like halfway through, and I was injured at the time, so I didn't get to meet him too much. But when I came back in 2021 and 2022, I got to build at least a relationship with him. And then as I took over more with the club, we got to grow that relationship a bit, and now we get to have conversations and we talk about players and who's not making Seawolves roster, who he wants to see more playing or get more playing time, all those things. So I don't think there's much of an issue with guys moving back and forth. I think we have a good understanding now of guys who are not making the Seawolves roster week in and week out, have an opportunity to come play with the club, but they need to be part of the club in some way, right? They don't just get to go play with the Seawolves and then just jump into a game. There's an understanding there that if they're gonna, if we're gonna be their home club, then we're their home club, right? You buy into the culture. You need to be part of the team. You need to make at least 1 or 2 practices a week, right? We have an understanding that those guys are practicing every day. So I'm not worried about their fitness level or their skill level as much, but they need to be around the guys. And what that does is just build that camaraderie and creates those connections, which makes it easier to play with them on the field. So yeah, we don't have guys that just necessarily jump in and jump out. We have a good understanding of this is why this guy is here. He's going to be coming once a week on a Tuesday or Thursday. If he knows that he's not being selected this week, then there's a good chance he'll be on the Seattle roster. He'll be at training. So, and usually I know that ahead of time too. So I'll have a chat with Clarkey on a Monday or Tuesday, and that way we know here's the players that are going to be with Seattle this week. And then if a new guy might be coming in, then that's a conversation that we can have with that player. Hey, if you want to come play with us, Clark would like you to do that, but here's what I expect of you. So I try and give them everything that they need on order to succeed. It's tough when we only have Tuesday, Thursday, and then we play on a Saturday, right? It's nothing like a professional schedule, but we try and provide all the things that they would need on order to succeed once they get there. So we have film of every game, and we do film breakdowns, and we talk about what we can improve upon. I always allow the guys to have an opportunity to reach out to me and figure out what they need to improve upon, where they're succeeding at, what they need to do in order to get to the next level. Unfortunately, I can't do one-on-ones with everybody all the time because I think we have 70 guys that are registered with the club right now. But I do open my door as far as like you can reach out at any time. We can have those one-on-ones, and guys who really want to succeed there make the effort, right? Will come find me or will talk to me about those things and how they can get there. And then again, I have those conversations with Clarky, and I can tell him, well, this guy's doing really well. What areas are you looking for in this position, right? What do you want to see, or where are you missing something? And can this guy provide that, or what can I tell these guys in order to get better at it? And so that way, we can break down film with the guys. We can go over systems. We also run a system that's not too different from what the Seawolves run, or at least what we used to, and I believe what they're still running this year. So that way, like, it's an easy transition from one to the other. I try and take some of the things that I know what Clark is doing and add them into my program. That way, they have an idea of what it's like in a professional environment, and they would be able to again transition pretty easily. So yeah, we run into challenges with the fact that again we train twice a week for two hours each training, and it's just not enough time, right, to really give them that experience. But at the same time, I try and arm them with the tools that they would need to go into a professional program and still be able to fit in or succeed there. We have guys with families and full-time jobs with different hours and all these different things that they need to take care of, right? And that's not even going into like the psychological side where they may be struggling with money or with housing or all these different things that we try and help them with. But yeah, it's tough to be able to mold those players too, to get them to that level. I mean, you could have a phenomenal athlete who's 28 years old, but they have so many other things in their lives that it's hard to make them into that rugby player that would fit into a professional team. So yeah, we try and give them as many tools as we can to help them get there. And I think we had some good success, or we have some good success with the club. I think we've had, close to, Glenn would have the final numbers, but I think we had like 45, 46 guys who have played for the club, who have gone on to play in the MLR. Not just for the Seawolves, but for the Saber Caps. For I think we had a guy go to Old Glory, to NOLA, right? San Diego, Utah. So guys from the club have gone all over the place and done very well. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting process of making sure that they have everything they need to get there, and it's tough, right, to give them those opportunities too. That's another piece that's been growing, is that in my opinion, the MLR hasn't had a great way of scouting players, of finding people within the US. They have a draft within colleges, but again, the college system is tough in that you have probably 8 teams that really dominate as college programs. And even then, not all of those guys are necessarily ready to make the jump into a professional program. So out of, I can't remember how many guys they draft, but like out of 50 guys, you may have 4 or 5 that are ready to be, full-time starters. So then where do the rest of your rugby players come from, right? You need to have a certain number of Americans within your program. So those are generated out of your club level, but then how do you go about finding those, which you go to combines, or you create combines, but even then you're only getting the guy for 3 hours. And is that enough to really assess a person's skill level to go on to the next level? So it's only just started. Well, some clubs are doing it well. Seawolves have started doing something similar, but right, buying into the club game and getting involved within that to then develop players within the clubs to be able to fill your team, right? And that's kind of been a work in progress throughout the years. The Seawolves in 2018 and 2019 were very lucky in that they had a very experienced group of guys within Seattle who were able to then fill the club's needs, and they got some very good international players that came in. But we were strong in those 2 years, especially because of the bench that we had, which were predominantly American, right? So when you have experience like that, able to come in and finish games, that was a big difference maker for us. And that was due a lot to the Seattle Rugby Club. And so, yeah, building those relationships and getting guys, getting the MLR to buy into the club level, to help develop, to help run programs, to create opportunities, make the league better in the long run, and give guys more opportunity there. It was up and down. I mean, I had a lot of fun. It was good to go. In 2018, 2019 were obviously very exciting to win back-to-back championships. It was pretty crazy as far as like work-life rugby balance, right? To be able to train as much as possible full-time. I mean, those first 2 years too, we were player coached, which was odd. I think 2019 we brought in Richie, who did a great job of helping run the program and put us in the right direction. Like I said, there are highs and lows points of that my whole entire career. I think because 2020 we brought in a brand new coach in Keys, who's a great guy. Love him as a person. As a coach, he was a bit new. I guess he hadn't been a head coach necessarily of a professional team. He'd done a lot of coaching within professional leagues, but had a bit tougher time with him. My final year with Clarkey was good at times, tough at others. I mean, as professional sports are, you have your highs and lows. But yeah, I mean, it's a growing league, so it's one of those things where I took everything with a grain of salt, and that I didn't really have a ton of expectations of one way or the other. I just wanted to be able to play rugby at the best of my ability. So, yeah, I wasn't too worried if, for instance, we didn't have treatment or food for one day because, they forgot to schedule it properly, or they didn't have all the right pieces in place to have those things set up, or some of the flights that we had that were absolutely ridiculous. It was interesting, but they're definitely, I think, improving in what they're giving the players. So I got to, I think, pave the way a little bit, and the things that I did and the feedback I gave them. Gave me a much better perspective on on how the club and the professional team can work together. I think that played a big part into my final season, and wanting to be part of the Seawolves. One, because I still want to play at a high level and felt I could. Two, I wanted to see how it was being run still, and if there could be a better connection between the Seawolves and Seattle Rugby Club, and if I could help bridge that gap. I've tried to help grow that and kind of rebuild that relationship. I've been blessed with having lots of different coaches from all over the world and seeing how things work, and I take pieces of what I like and what I don't like and build my own coaching style. And I've also taken it from the football world. My previous job, I worked for a company called Atavis, and we coached tackling, or helped teams with tackling. Learning how a football coach runs their team at that level. So we've worked with professional and we work with college, and it's very different. It's very organized, and um, there's a certain style to it. Rugby is much more free flowing, but kind of combining those has helped me kind of like organize, especially with the club level, where at the professional level you get you know 4 hours a day, maybe more, for all week long for 5 days to be able to build your team, right? You get to design your system, you get to develop your players, you get to figure out who fits in what kind of area, whereas I get 4 hours in a week, right, to try and put this all together. So it's allowed me to become a bit more organized in the way that I run my program, and set up my trainings, and that way uh, it's a bit easier to one, help create a cohesive team, but also two, help develop these players into what they need to be. Because um, at the club level, it's tough because also you get guys who are, right, maybe coming from the MLR, who have played there, and like myself, who have retired and just want to keep on playing because it's fun, right? And they enjoy it, and they can't stop. And then you get a guy who's you know 21, who's never touched a rugby ball in his life and just saw it while he was driving by one day and decided he wanted to do it, right? So you get all these different levels of players, and you have to figure out how can you design a training where nobody's left behind and nobody's bored, right? I don't want my best player to sit there and feel like they're not getting anything out of it, but I also don't want to discourage this guy who's coming in, who could be a great player, and to never want to play again because, right, he's not confident in what's happening. So it's been an interesting dynamic of creating trainings that are built around that, and making sure that everybody's always challenged but never discouraged in what they're doing. We're creating confidence in the way we play, and giving guys more opportunity than they had in the past.